As a matter of national policy, whether managed by Democrats or Republicans, bad memories of yesterday, America frequently asserts itself as the globe's primary international authority. Predictably, America's tools to implement that global posture belong to the lexicon of its business capacity or its military prowess. Architecture, on the other hand, recognizes no such international pontificate. We, each of us, qua institutions, qua architects, make our case in the international forum or we don't. Architecture is only and forever a cultural discourse. Ideas, the sole currency. The unique potentiality of ideas to alter ways of seeing, thinking, and understanding is the essence of that exchange. Strange to say, perhaps, SCI-Arc is an American school. Sounds odd. SCI-Arc is an American school, but contrary to the conventional means available to implement America's business and military capacities, SCI-Arc has only one plausible means to make its point. SCI-Arc faculty, SCI-Arc alumni, SCI-Arc students build and build and build again. Building is the answer, or rather, building is the answer that intentionally raises the questions the cultural exchange demands. Building is SCI-Arc's venue. Brendan MacFarlane inhabits that venue. At its best, the building venue is a bastion of cultural speculation. At its best, SCI-Arc's mission is to redirect the speculators. Brendan MacFarlane's building redirects the discourse. SCI-Arc is an architecture school with a foreign policy. The architecture culture goes where the forces of business and the military cannot. Brendan's green thing on the banks of the Seine proves that case. On occasion, SCI-Arc acknowledges a practicing architect and former student who has added a new voice to the world's cultural constituency. And it's fair to point out that when SCI-Arc gives such an award, SCI-Arc is simultaneously acknowledging the success of its own pedagogical goals. Walking along the banks of the Seine last winter, I bumped into a new pedagogical directive, a ubiquitous green thing. Was it ubiquitous because it was what it was, or because it was where it was, or because whatever it was green? Here in the center of Paris, amidst the centuries-old, sometimes acrimonious exchange of cultural voices, was the inkling of a new prospect, Brendan MacFarlane's. French President Sarkozy, perhaps apprehensive about the arrival of a vision outside his vision, labeled the MacFarlane building on the Seine the green thing. SCI-Arc appreciates Brendan's courage. SCI-Arc respects Brendan's audacity. SCI-Arc admires Brendan's imagination. SCI-Arc supports Brendan's independence. And SCI-Arc applauds pleated walls, orange cubes, and plug-over insertions. Please welcome Brendan MacFarlane, SCI-Arc's Alumnus of the Year, back to SCI-Arc.
Very nice. Well, thanks very much for that introduction. More than introduction, very, very touching. Because I knew Eric was going to introduce the work, but it's always a pleasure to hear someone reading and going into the thing of what we try and do in architecture and creativity in a little bit more depth. And somehow, I think Eric has touched on a number of things which have interested me for a long time. And those things, of course, are a reason why I was left New Zealand, lived in Sydney, Australia, and then having a sister that had just come back from America, telling me that you've got to go and travel around America and have a look and see what you think that it's a really interesting country. And that was in the very early 80s. And so I took off and went on a long sort of voyage of exploration, thinking that I would like to probably come here and carry on with a kind of education which was really more about carrying my briefcase around, or briefcase, my suitcase really, around the world and dropping into different cities or different locations and making my own education. And after traveling around America, I came to SCI-Arc, and which at that point, of course, was over in Santa Monica. A sort of very early prototype of what we're in today. But a prototype, of course, which has been somehow repeated and has changed and grown and become bigger and more, even more extraordinary and more involved with the world. That the magic, of course, that SCI-Arc had in the early 80s, I see as something which immediately, or I remember as something which immediately attracted me to the school. And thinking that the only thing I could possibly do was to leave Australia and come back to America, but the only problem I had at hand was that I had no money to do that. So, of course, I joined this fleet of students that lived under their tables at SCI-Arc, that had no money like myself, and essentially transformed, and some of them are here tonight, for example, Mark, my fellow New Zealander, who was one of those. And we were about 30 that lived under these tables, slept under our tables at night, tried to get a shower maybe once a week, in a shower that leaked, talking of green stuff, into a lower floor condition, if I really start to talk about space, and all of this, in a way, somehow being a kind of I think part of what made SCI-Arc then and now something is a very special and unique experience. And so this issue of unique, or this issue of doing carrying this kind of interest through as a student and then carrying it through into our work was very important to me. And it's, of course, it's always a strange voyage because you don't get to do it immediately. You run out, you do other stuff, you work for a whole bunch of people, and you gradually find yourself at one point making this terribly urgent jump, which again is saying, I've got no money, I've got one client, and let's just do it. And so that's what I did with my partner, who was French, who had also come through Los Angeles at a later period of time, whom I met back in Paris, and we started our office. And on one commission, which of course paid very little, but we started that way. But I would say that for me, those initial interests that I learned at SCI-Arc has been something which has pushed me all the way through. Even to the point of building the green thing, as Eric calls it, or in French, the truc vert. And the best translation of the truc, I believe, Valerie, who's another good friend here tonight, from France, and is now living in Los Angeles, is the best word is thing. But a thing is not a truc. And so that's a problem of translation, which is also another kind of interesting issue. But building the thing, sure, it involved a lot of interesting moves, and so a little bit of that I want to go into tonight, as well as other projects which involve other kinds of moves, and explain to you a little bit about our process and how we've got to build maybe the more important projects right now, which are of a larger scale, and present to you in a way somehow the process in the office. So if I would continue the first project, I've got a bunch of slides, maybe there's too many, as Wendy's pointed out. So I'm going to probably go through them quite quick in some cases, you must excuse me. But I wanted to at least show you some work. The work isn't lineal, so we jump around a little bit for different reasons. The first project is the Orange Cube in Lyon. And it's a project which we built over a period of time. We won a competition for an area. I mean, I'm going to display because it's just more useful, but this being Lyon, which is the city more or less towards the south of France. And essentially, what you have is this fantastic condition of two rivers that come together, called the Saône and the Rhône. And where they come together at this point, of course, is the Museum of Coupe-la-Mourbard, which is under construction right now after a long kind of gestation. Old Lyon, which is based on a kind of Renaissance Italian interests of squares, extraordinary kind of periphery conditions around those squares, a series of intimate square spaces. And of course, these buildings which are facades, but really never in a way so much interact with the water as opposed to really the bridges, which are these lineal moves. And then what you have in Lyon, which is extraordinary, is that all of that stops, and this area was a swampland where we found prisons, hospitals. In a way, the unwanted of the city lived here, and right up until, I would say, even into the late 20th century, where all of this area, which was the old docklands, was a big area of prostitution, drugs, etc. And what's interesting is that there has been a transformation of this area recently to become one of Europe, the second largest construction site in Europe. And a series of competitions with a lot of different architects. We're involved in this edge here. And that edge is remarkable because just across the way here, you have what is, really there's only two conditions like it in Europe. One is in Prague, where you have this condition of kind of a bucolic landscape edge coming down in the center of the city. And you have this kind of absurd contrast between one side, which is green, bucolic, and in this case, vineyards, churches, institutes, Catholic institutes, etc. And the other, which today is rapidly becoming an urbanized edge condition. So here we have two sites that we won in the competition along that edge. So I can explain it a little bit better if I can move on. And the two buildings, one is a green, not a thing in this case, but a green box, and the other is an orange box. And if we carry on a little bit further, what we did was there is a great word in French called gabarit. And gabarit is like, it's another word called emprise, but a gabarit is in a way, for a building is the invisible space into which one can build, that one can't build outside of that space. So it becomes a restriction of sorts. Now, whether you want to dump that and say, the fact that I'll do what I want, it's one option. Another one is to say that I'll build within that and be very respectful. Another one is to say that maybe, in fact, it becomes quite interesting to use that restriction as a jumping off point. In our case, we're very interested in these kinds of issues of where one can't go, and then what one can do with it. And so what we decided was that this invisible box, this volume of space, was imposed to us by an urbanist, was actually something quite interesting. Why didn't we then, in fact, take that and use that as the jumping off point? So it's a kind of decision with it, and it's a non-decision also, which is something which I think we quite like in our work. One's interested in. And in this case, we came up with this idea of creating what we call a tripartite vide, a void that's a three-part void. And the problem of it's easy to describe it here really, but the problem of the box is that we have so many floors of office building. And then there's two levels, which in French they call the cultural levels, which is, in our case, we could propose for the competition what we thought. So we collaborated with two artists, Fabrication, particularly for the Green project, and another artist, which since we've changed for the Orange, and these artists we came up with a theme. One was for eating, food, and Lyon, of course, being the gastronomic capital of the world. And the other one was in the Green project. We were working with this idea of relaxation, the body, and in a sense, therapy to do with the body and water. And so if we go on and develop these, in this case we're taking the orange box itself, the orange cube, into which, if I say, what's interesting about the tripartite volume is that between the normal way of going about a box like this would be to say that in Europe you have, like you do in America, you have very strict rules about how far you can go back in terms of getting natural light into a building for working conditions. And after that, you're meant to develop a solid core. Or, inversely, you actually have a vertical core, which is a courtyard inside the building, and so you're getting light conditions from both sides. In this case, we knew that we couldn't do it all the way through, and in a sense, we sort of weren't terribly interested in that. And what was interesting with the cultural level is we didn't need to get any light into those two levels. So it led to this idea of a U or a conic condition, which both cores the building, but then cores out to the river. And so here we're interested in both the view out to the river and the edge, and dealing with this idea that maybe for the first time in Lyon, we can get the people in Lyon to start looking at this natural condition, the river as an edge condition, and it being in a way somehow brought back inside the building. And we thought that was a unique chance, because it isn't, as I said, I was very careful to describe in a way the way we went, or the past went about building Lyon, which was of course based, like a lot of cities, on precedents, and in effect doesn't really start to treat the condition of the river and its influence as a fluid medium. So I think what's interesting here is we start to bring some of these interests together. We also were in an area, a district, which had heavy environmental interests. So we had to come in with these rules that could articulate air through the building and climatize the building in a natural way, non-mechanical. In the end, we have a double solution of mechanical and naturally ventilated. So the idea of the court, of course, is that it can become a chimney for air. So there's a whole, in a way, what interests here, like a lot of projects, is that as you gradually move through from conception and towards, we're also dealing with the micro rules, along with your bigger concepts, those concepts somehow also become more informed, or in some cases, actually, one deletes or takes out certain things. And I think that's a very interesting aspect to mention, because I think the whole process of building and making something is inherently related to your conceptual ideas, and the validation or non-validation of those, and as they move through the project, one actually, it essentially has the strengthening thing in this phenomenon of picking up speed with the project, which I think is very important. So as anyway, these are just images which actually start to deal with this idea of conic interventions, leaving a resultant from the agabory, leaving a resultant coring of the project, and then as we move through the issues of, there was a series of tests that we did with also air conditions. There's different air movements along the rivers. As you know, rivers through cities are often the major air highways in a climatic sense. So those air highways are very interesting to hook into. And in this case, the cone worked really beautifully in terms of bringing air through the building and through a chimney effect, of course, moving up through the roof. So these are studies. This is the green project, which was another part of the competition. It was an interesting competition because we had Chiguruban, Odile Deck, us, and a number of other architects that won different buildings along an edge. And so, in a way, it was a friendly competition. None of us really somehow lost. The first buildings to be built in this sequence is the orange one. And one of the pieces that we're studying, the next piece, is this building here, which we'll be building normally, we'll begin next year, for Euronews as their headquarters, which is an interesting experience. So this is the building, of course, which works well for them because it's all about seeing and hearing and somehow transforming information. Here, we're back to the building, the orange cube, which I'm presenting here. And those conic interventions, of course, become interesting in a number of ways. You know, I've talked about the air, I've talked about the views, I've talked about the idea of the light. Also, of course, the condition, our project isn't just involving the orange, but it's involving an earlier building, which is the salt storage facility, because right along, as I said, right along this edge, there was a series of units, it's industrial, and mostly related to boating on the river. I should say storage facilities for boats pulling up alongside. And so in this case, the conic volume as an outtake becomes interesting in its relationship, of course, or it's in a way a slight tilting of the hat towards, of course, the existing geometric condition of the roofs of the existing salt buildings. So here, of course, these are just models taking us through the site plan, looking down through these pavilions, taking you through the different floor conditions. That somehow what we end up with is these very interesting, huge balconies on every level, which give all of the participants within the building the ability to go out, have a cigarette, or use the space as a communal space. We see these as kind of a communal window space onto the river. But it's a strange space because it's both a window, it's both a chimney, it's both a light condition. It's porous, and that porosity, of course, can be seen in these different views. And here we are under construction, which is really, it's still not exactly finished, but we're very close to being finished. These are really photos this year. As we move around the building, what we end up with kind of then a sub-aspect of the climatic, it's not a sub, it's kind of a parallel climatic thing, which is quite important, is the skin. We have a double layer skin. The inner one is the one acting through thermal, dealing with all the thermal problems of capacity, input, outtake of the building throughout all the seasons. And then this outside skin, which is almost like a lace skin, is dealing with leaving as much light coming out into the building, I should say, but actually reducing, like a veil, the amount of solar input into the building. So that's hence how the project developed. And I should say what was very interesting is that when we won the competition, as you can see in the models, we imagined them as completely glass blocks, and with a seriograph, with a frittage on the paint, dealing with these problems of thermal light, etc. And as the thermal laws changed radically in Europe from winning the competition and then going into the phase of studying the thing to be built, we went up against the major problem, which was maybe we couldn't even build the orange thing because the orange box, because the thermal laws negated, got rid of the idea of doing it in glass. So in that sense, we had to imagine the building, and instead of being transparent, we turned the thing on its head and said, well, why don't we just start with the idea that the box is completely opaque? And so by cutting into that facade, digitally cut, with a digitally cut perforated surface, we started to deal with the problems of thermal and solar intake. These are views out to the river. Each level, as you go up through the building, you have this kind of very strange optical experience of it becoming a cube and moving up through into a circle. And of course, the views are different on what they're focusing on from each level. And that's the interest of looking across the cone. One starts to see all of the levels and the people working on the different levels. So what's interesting today is that we have this incredible transparency with the offices. Maybe a little bit less transparent with what we showed there in that earlier image. Digitally perforated screens in 3mm aluminium. Dealing with the problem of views out, but reducing again that solar intake, but then actually keeping the kind of the box-like quality. And of course the language is a faceted language, none of it's a continuous geometry. And views around the building and views up through. Now we're starting to skin the insides of the cones. And we have, of course, a terrace volume, which again, urban rules state that box on the inner part needs to be set back a certain distance from the facade. So urbanistically, there's a whole series of things going on. This is that terrace space. And views out to the river, inside the offices, an urban view, another urban view, so you can start to see the relation of the river and the boxes. In the future, what we should have in an earlier model, huge floating terraces, which will be floating cafes in front of the water. And I think you can see that from the green model, is that those terraces are, in a way, the materialization of the cones as they come through, or the cone in this case, is two, as it comes through, and it comes through the building and touches the water of the river. So the light conditions throughout the day, of course, it's the sort of classic ocular stuff. As that light turns, you get this kind of extraordinary orange glow inside the offices. And here we're again continuing to skin the beast. And we're sort of, more or less, those images are about 3 weeks old. So a project called 100 Logements Social. It's 100 apartments in Paris that we finished a couple of years ago. I'm not sure if I've shown this before, I think I may have shown earlier images of the project in its conception. I don't think I showed it under construction, but it was finished a couple of years ago. A stereolithic model of the piece. Really, it was I'm not showing earlier projects, which I have shown inside before, including the Florence Loewy bookshop, where we were very interested after Pompidou. The Georges Restaurant of Pompidou was taking a matrice in French, which is a matrix, and the matrix is defined by, in a way, the programmatic element that you're putting into it. In that case, it was books. In this case, we decided that the programmatic element was an apartment block, in a way like a sugar cube, and that cube of space would be 4.53 meters wide and floor to floor in height. So the matrix in this case becomes a gigantic urban matrix. And why we applied it to the site was because the site had so many problems. I should say, in French they use the word données, which are like the givens, the things which you have to somehow deal with. Again, you can avoid them by avoiding it, obviously. What interests, again, in our work is very much actually working with those kinds of given conditions and playing with them, playing off them, and seeing if we can actually often make a project which is defined by them. Why? Because, of course, we're interested in grounding the piece and somehow also finding an inner resonance within the project, its site, its the accumulations of different problems or issues, human, psychological, physical, etc. And in this case, it's we had 8 kind of données. The site had been an old hospital in Paris in the 90s. There was a series of trees. We had to preserve about 7 old trees, 100-year-old trees. We had to build with housemaking setback lines. We had to, there were certain pieces of land where there were high concentrations of mercury, which we could not dig into. And so the car park is split into 3 elements, etc. So there's all of these things going on, which for us were actually, of course, they're fascinating. And of course, they're interesting as an architect. You don't avoid, you don't, it's not a rule. But for us, we're very interested in this issue of not avoiding, but actually trying to work with those issues. So here we are going around the model. It, of course, is a later finished clarification of what we're trying to do. The resultant elements themselves. This is just an earlier diagram defining, actually, we had huge restrictions, also environmental restrictions. And again, I'm using the wrong word when I say restrictions, because we see these new environmental laws in France as being actually very interesting. Of course, as a designer, as a creator, to try and work for a better world is not so bad. And so how do we think about these issues that we may have in common? As Eric rightly pointed out, it doesn't come down to which party you're on. It comes down to interests of humanity. And as a designer, we have, as the French say, des chantiers gigantesques devant nous. We have a lot of work in front of us there. So the interesting issues now, I would say the interesting issues to do with, I think, all of this environment, ecological kinds of issues being talked about in Europe is that we need to be very careful to quickly move as architects and creators and thinkers with these kinds of rules that are coming to be placed and put into our, in front of us. Why? Because it's somehow to be able to kind of work with them and conceptualize and be creative and create an architecture that's about thinking and thoughts and ideas and be informed by these kinds of issues. And not in a way fall back into just discussing it as an environmental project. I think that's a major, in a way, pitfall somehow. And a weakness, because somehow I think we run the risk of weakening the arguments of creating a world that's really starting to build, in a way, healthier environments for us. So that's a sort of a tangent, but it's an important one. So I think coming back on the project here, anyway, these are just kind of standard drawings of getting you through the project. The islands, or the in a way, the hills emerged from this interest of cutting into the matrix, and we developed this idea of a balcony, which was a sans fin, continuous loop of space. And that balcony, in a way, is the unique element that doesn't repeat. These apartments often do repeat, but that edge, in a sense, which is somehow where also one would say is the most expensive part if one wanted to rationalize it economically, is the unique aspect to a series of highly repetitive, extremely organized, and very dense housing plans. And then the other interest, I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on. Of course, in France, there's a big thing about making apartments traversant, which is, of course, the idea of being able to get light from both ends of the apartment. Having, enough thermal mass, in this case, it's a concrete poured construction. Having, in this case, we had a thing called the Jardin d'Hiver, and we came up with a Dutch company with this idea of making a shower curtain, which every owner, every apartment you could pull across the shower curtain in wintertime and create your own thermal space, which added on between 8 and 14 meters onto a standard apartment. And that was interesting because somehow it's not the bought meters squared of the apartment, it adds on more space, so people end up with a living room in winter. Hence we have balconies today with television sets, cats, cat play areas, including storerooms for people's unwanted furniture, etc. So it's kind of in a sense, it's the most communal. The strip becomes, in a way, the most communal. Becomes the most communal space of the project. And so, if I keep on going, this is the project from the roof of a nearby building. The solar panels onto the solar panels on the building produce 60% of the hot water of the building, so there's interesting issues there. This is the plastic skin as it's being pulled around in wintertime, so they become these sort of three-dimensional somehow a kind of a curtain thing, which closes up. And then in the summertime, of course, each apartment is pulled back. What we also have on each project is the levels, and the datum is quite important. At the level of the ground floor, all of the apartments in this building are for heavily handicapped people. It's social housing, so you don't own the building, you rent it from the city. And the heavily handicapped people on this lower floor have a nurse that's full-time on site. And the garden, in a way, becomes both an extension of their living rooms of the handicapped people, but also as a public garden for all of the 100 apartments. And that became kind of an interesting issue of how do we create shared. There's a big problem in public housing between your inner private world and then the street. And somehow, where do people meet each other, talk, hang out, or don't they? And in most cases they don't, and if they do, as an architect, then you create these kind of spaces, or give, or in a way, create these tensions that can create these kind of spaces where people pass time, talk to each other, etc. So if I'm jumping around a bit because this is the apartment, the plastic curtain, which is put in place. It's inside the apartment. Again, it's very sparse, it's very simple. It's not, the budget isn't enormous because we're showing that again in social housing. But the idea is to get a lot of light. They're often complex pieces of geometries. And with, in some cases, very large balconies, which become very interesting for people. Again, the rail, you can see that holds the curtain. This is one of the guys that's putting the curtain up. There's an 85-year-old guy that is seemingly very happy to be living there. And this is the kind of space that we have now. We have we talk about the three hills as having a landscape datum. The primary one is that garden that I talked about, and then on each level you have a volcanic rock edge, which is communally fed through a watering system. So it doesn't rely upon the individual watering it. And this level, this tooth, as the Italians call it, is a brick on which lichens, mosses, and a series of different plants are seeded that grow up at different times of the year on that edge. These are these into the communal spaces. This is when the tree, one of the 100-year-old trees, has been really tightly cut back during the construction phase. But each of the buildings somehow becomes built, of course, around the space of the tree, and therefore becomes these. Again, there's an aspect of how I was talking about this kind of eating out into the Matthews. This datum running through to the third building. You can see the boulevard there. So we drop a lot of height down into the lower conditions, into which we bring cars, etc. And viewed from a garden space which will be turned into communal gardening for the city at a later date. And showing, in a way, the different levels and the way people are living on those levels. The relationship between the three pieces. The project, of course, that Eric was talking about, which is the city. In French, it's called the City of Mode and Design, and it's this piece, which in English, of course, it's the City of Design and Fashion. And why it's called that is because it was an international competition. We were 12 people that were finally selected. And each team, it was kind of an interesting case because it was where a developer came to us and said, "You want to be part of our team to come up with a proposal." And we sort of balked with it at the initial stages because in a way you're working with a developer and coming up, coming up with a piece of architecture, it's all going to be money, and will we really be able to do anything finally, And we jumped on board anyway because, of course, like any architect, you don't really balk for too long. And a lot of work, certainly. And in this case, we worked for a long time with them. over a 6-month period, and we formed a team, and that was what's incredible, is that with the team we came up, each of the 12 teams came up with a unique idea and proposed that. And in this case we came up with an idea which brought fashion and design in France, or on the international scene as well, together for the first time. Certainly in France it's interesting because these things have been completely, been two different areas of education, creativity. The fashion world has been, you never see a fashion school in France, and you never see a design school. You know, there are things which are sort of lost in sort of atelier conditions in old bourgeois buildings in the 16th. And what was interesting here is we had a group called the IFM, Institut Français de la Mode, which is really the St. Martins of France, who we brought on board as the team, and then have today the fashion school of IFM is in this part of the building. And they're a really exciting school. This piece is a whole school, and it's a school of like 140 students from all over the world. And for France it's unique because the language of the school is English. All the classes are taught in English, meaning, and their course is about creating the fashion designers of tomorrow. But in their curriculum, as they've moved into this building, they now have a curriculum. One of the courses is on architecture, one is on, of course, design. And so what's fantastic is they are doing what they wanted to do, which is merge and synchronize, create a kind of, synchrony is not really the right word, but create through mixity and crossover between these different disciplines, the chances of coming up with new territories of thinking and ideas and ultimately creation. And so what's very interesting with this end of the building is that then that is mixing with, from here to here on this second level, you have a big area called the Événementiel in French, which is an exhibition area, which is more or less totally for the moment devoted to design and fashion. But we've just, as I was explaining to Eric before the conference, we've just had a big art fair inside the building on 3 levels called Chic, which just finished 5 days of having all of the Parisian public through the building, including major installation artwork on the terrace and galleries from all over the world in the exhibition area. And so that was an exciting moment, and what we've had this year is the design fair, also in the building with exhibitions by students designing schools from around Europe, showing inside the building. So what's happening is the building is gradually starting to live and being opened up. We're not fully running in the left part of the building yet, but we hope to be running full-time soon. So it's not, the building's still not completely open. Anyway, if I'm going to move a bit faster, I'm sure I should, is that the context, we're in an amazing moment. It's a moment which is straddling the 19th, 20th centuries. We have in the photo, best of the industrial revolution, or the best, obviously the industrial and decorative version of the industrial revolution above us. And in front, we have another kind of aspect of that revolution. In this case, it was poured in place reinforced concrete. And one of the first prototypes, we're talking about 1907, it was a building which interested Le Corbusier a lot. He wrote about it in a text, and we're talking about 1907. The Domino House we're talking about is 1922. So, and we're talking about a building in the heart of Paris, and it was an ugly building. Parisians never liked it. But they were aware of it, and it's called the Docks of Paris. And like Lyon, I don't know why, but we end up with 2 projects in parallel conditions, one in the middle of France, one in Paris, both dealing with this issue of taking goods off boats, putting them in a building, and then dispersing them by steam train, horse and cart, etc. But the photo again is fantastic. In the foreground you have people, I don't know what they were doing, searching for, like an image of the Thames where people are searching in the silt, with kind of a primal, muddy emergence of water and slush. And in the background, you have this long tugboat, ocean liner of the thing. And it was already actually a thing at that point somehow. So if we keep on going, what interested me about the thingness of it was that it also at that point had these other things which are attached. And we're talking about, of course, all the steel work. And in this case, there were 5 major cranes attached to the sides which brought the goods up, swung them inside, as you can see on the left. And this thing ran across the roof on a rail track system. So we're talking about a kind of, I don't know what you call them in America, but you know, it sounds strange because I've been out in America maybe too long, but you know, the mechanism where you put money in and it goes along and goes up and grabs you Morrow bar or something. You know, in a sense, this is a major, massive piece of that kind of equipment already built, as you can imagine, in a tilting moment between 19th and 20th century. So interesting, interesting stuff. And of course, a building which would go on to influence the world. And here you can see the aspect of those cranes. And then on the back, what's really weird is that you had horse and dray taking this stuff, all these goods, off by horse and cart into the rest of Paris, or by locomotive underbuilding. So it's a piece of early infrastructure. As I said, it was considered to be quite ugly. It was never, we of course thought of, you know, we recognize it to be now as being quite beautiful in its own way. And it was, but having nevertheless never an interest in creating a facade. In the 1980s, 70s, 80s, you have this construction which is now completely filled with old nightclubs, CD rundown, different programs, but actually kind of funky and interesting. And it becoming also a building quite important to the cinema community in terms of the history of contemporary film, a number of important movies being filmed in and around the building. And so the city of Paris said to us, do you want to demolish it or keep it, which was crazy. And of course we said in our program, the idea of demolishing it on an environmental level alone was catastrophic. But on these other levels, of course, keeping it as a piece of a moment in history which seemed really interesting to us. And it gave us the ability, Jakob and MacFarlane, to actually place then what we were going to do in relationship to it. Because I think, of course, it would be, somehow in our work, it would be uninteresting to remove it and re-begin. And so we became fascinated in the structure. We imagined all of this as being cleaned up, which is what we did in the project. And then we placed, as Eric was saying, a plug over. We imagined a kind of new skin. And a skin which actually became a new structure, and finding, in a way, the rhythm of the building. The building basically goes 4 times A, then B. And B is essentially these wide openings here, where most of the goods traversed at that point, and then that point, etc. And they were 7.5, 10 meters. We broke the structure down along its length. We wanted it like an iterating device along with the length, because we wanted to do a number of things. One was parallel the river and work with the idea that there could be this kind of fluidity within this new facade-like, skin-like thing that brought in, again, a kind of a new dialogue into the river, which we didn't see as happening with the old building. So if we go into the structure, we started analyzing it, we decided geometrically, using the memory of those rhythms horizontally and then vertically, we came up with a new system, which was an arborescent system, where we started with a point, a line, and then 7 lines, growing from that existing geometry. And why we did that was because we realized that we wanted to introduce the program like what we did in George, imagining George as a massive carpet, and slipping, in a way, the program as a kind of fluid thing under that carpet would give us the ability of somehow making evident new programmatic aspect introduced into an existing thing. So here, of course, using that system, that led us to this whole issue of creating three-dimensional volumetric space, which could be birthed and killed where we wanted, and on anywhere across the site in a conceptual sense. So in that sense, then we said, well, the most interesting aspect to the project was if we were going to deal with the sand as the new facade, the front, then that front should really get the walkways, should get the idea of moving the public to the front of the building and then up across those levels. That was essentially the important movement. The city gave us like a 3.8 meter gallery of buildable space. So, this thing that I'm calling the gallery, the volume, the invisible volume, they gave us that, and then they said you can build up one floor above the existing building. So we developed this thing called the plug-over, and this is an early frittage model of it, as it is developed, really just showing, in a sense, the conceptual structural discourse between the existing structure in grey and the new in white. The programmatic pieces, and then the plan, the plan mass, essentially on the roof. Urbanistically, we could build within this area. We have, of course, the French love their axes, and we come through here. We have Hôpital Saint-Sulpice, which actually is an old hospital. These are the train tracks of Austerlitz train station. And there's a hospital, a little bit like the Pantheon, on axis. So urbanistically, when you're on the roof, you have this extraordinary view out over modern 1970s Paris in the north, and 80s office buildings here, and then through here to the 18th century chapel, which has now really become one of the, if you get to Paris, in terms of looking around the art spaces, they invite an artist once a year to exhibit inside that Pantheon-like space. It's an extraordinary place. So anyway, we built to the left and the right, and as you can see, if I take you through the building, this is simply taking you from the level of the quai, where the boats dock, and then up through the building. So we have different porosities which we wanted to keep. We had conditions of leading from the lower level, the quay, leading from the street, bringing people through the building on that famous axis that the city wanted us to keep, and then also bringing up people up through handicap ramp, etc., to that level. So the new project is very much about reaching out into the city and becoming a lot more about filtering and more about connecting. I think that's an extremely important point. And also this idea of developing a linearity in that sense, as opposed to a transverse condition before in its history. We were very aware of a whole new mentality shift that's gone on in the recent history of Paris towards the value of the bicycle, the idea that you're going to slowly get rid of the car from the center of Paris, and you're transforming the edges of the river from being just a museum to being a living river where people are moving up and down boats as they get rid of the cars. They'll be living in cities on both sides of the river outside of Paris, and transforming the river again into a kind of a water route. And this is definitely a kind of in the green plan of Paris. And both of the edges right through Paris are being transformed, slowly transformed. And so the building for us was very much about making it part of the city and integrating the building absolutely within that future plan. And so moving up through the project, what we have at this end of the building is all of the Fashion Institute. We have a gallery space here, another shop here, and then all of this end of the building, we have a big restaurant, etc. going in, and then there's also a cafe. So the terrace for us is like a new, I would say for us, we've always also talked about this building as a kind of prototype for the future, where we can consider the roof spaces and this is nothing new, but it was just a very nice opportunity to do it here, is that we consider the roof spaces as being developable, really interesting developable surfaces within the city of Paris, as Paris is being blocked out, and densified or has been. Very few sites are left, except the roof. There's a huge quantity of extraordinary roof conditions. So for us, this becomes a very interesting prototype for its possibilities of doing maybe similar things along the river system and in other parts of the city. So we always talked about this as a plus, a new urban plus. And what's interesting, of course, in that new urban condition, these are just different images up through the thing. On that new urban condition, as I said, you have a view out across Paris, and you connect with a completely new vision of both Paris and also the water. The plug over is this. It comes across and it comes down very thin on that side. So that's like a gigantic U, which is extruded in terms of its gabarite right along the length. We never considered the building as a finished thing. So hence this idea of chopping the building at both ends. It's like a continuous linguini, or whatever you want to call it, that has this, in a sense, it has this kind of appearance. It has this aspect of appearing. And in a way where it appears and then disappears somehow isn't so important. Hence this interest of the cuts. And the cuts, of course, I think are also something which, it's interesting, the more you build, the more you work. You can see also parallels with earlier interests. George was about that. We're very interested in this idea of cut. And it's non-precision somehow. Or non-definitive aspect. Okay, so I'll probably move fast. Fabrication in Metz, where Shigeru was building the stuff for, of course, the museum. The fritage was, in this case, it was a double-layer piece of glass with the pattern inside. And the pattern in this case becomes very interesting because it's another way of bringing, like what we wanted to do with Leon, but we couldn't help with reducing the solar intake into the building. And we're very interested in structures that are growing over time. And this was just a nice, it's an easy way of saying it's growing in this case because it was a construction site. Of course, all construction sites grow. But what was spectacular with this one is that we really could actually play it out over a period of time. Well, I'm not really going to show you that, but I'm jumping now to the finished piece in terms of its site, the way it sits. So here, the condition is kind of extraordinary. Here you have Chemet's Bercy, where Mr. Sarkozy made his famous speech, looking out towards that. And you have, of course, Perrault's library, and all of the urban condition along here. You can see these buildings in the back, because some people say, yeah, but it's awful, what you're surrounded with. And it's a kind of ridiculous statement because I'm actually very interested in this idea of awful. Well, I'm not interested, but I'm kind of interested in this idea that, anyway, what's awful and not awful, but somehow we had what was interesting here is what the neutrality, one way of putting it is the neutrality of these buildings gave us the ability of doing something. And I would say that was one aspect of how we could make it an intervention here, because the city of Paris, as you can rightly assume, is an extremely difficult place to make new work in. Here, of course, is the end of the Fashion Institute on the right. We worked, like a lot of our projects, we try and work every time with an artist. In this case, we work because we find the collaborations really interesting, and obviously some are more successful or more synergetic than others. But in this case, it was with Jan Caselli, who for me, I consider France's greatest light artist, and who worked with this in developing the light for the plug over on the street, on the riverside, and then a special kind of light on the roof that goes up and down with the human breath. And these are views looking out across the plug. The notion, the idea really of the plug, of course, is you can move up and down. And you have multiple choices, multiple ways of entering the building, from the bottom up, multiple different staircases. Of course, the interest here is that the stair is a crawling stair. And that comes out of a long interest that we've had of how the kind of nautical conditions, or nautical is not the right word, if the quai architectures of the quai, of how ramps come down, steps come down to the water and then leave and come down along the length of the, getting into the ancient, older Paris. And that's an aspect certainly that we were very interested in bringing into the docks project. Somehow how do you link an already old thing that is somehow separate from its site back into the site. And anyway, these are views, different aspects. Move around. We have a boat which is newly created, which is the green boat. Here in the image, I don't know if you get it. It's very funny, it's somehow being cut, but there's sorry. Oh. And so it makes the connection with the water even more meaningful. So here is the structure that we wanted to keep, because you can see it's an extremely interesting thing. It's a very elegant structure. It's the kind of thinness of concrete that we would never do today due to the kind of security. Security is not the word, but due to the distance between steel and the edge of the concrete surface. But here you have an extraordinary combination of both elegant and quite brute, quite over-designed, fat concrete columns. And inside the plug over, as we get a transversal, a longitudinal view through that transversal condition. And this is just one view of a series of the gallery exhibits that I was talking about, which we appreciate a lot because we're hoping that the interiors of all of these insides will be kept as brute, as rough as possible, because it is it's an aspect of the docks which is really fantastic. Entry for the Fashion Museum and Fashion Institute. That boat, up from the boats, they come in, there's two boats up on the roof, and so we get to look out on the Charles de Gaulle bridge, and in the background, I think you should see Notre Dame, it should be a little bit to the left. And the buildings then across the way, which is the ones I was talking about, these buildings from the 70s, which at night time become very interesting in the relationship with this new urban place, and how you get the volumes, the emerging volumes of the program from the flat surface, moving up and creating a real, in this case, a real landscape, which is a tundra landscape, which is again fed off a system of buried plastic piping inside the roof. All the wood is French oak, which is renewable. So it's resource-wise, this is quite interesting arguments, and it just happens to be a really beautiful material. And the programs within those. Centre Orleans, and this is one of the projects, along with the Orange project, this is one of the second project which we're presenting in the library tonight for the exhibition. And the Frank Centre has had an incredible history with, actually I would say the world, in terms of a thing called Archilab, which was initiated by Frédéric Figaro and Marion Breyer. Frédéric has gone to Centre Pompidou, but still somehow continues a sort of a moral interest in the whole site and the functioning and the exhibitions that they'll be doing in the future. Marion, she was running and is really our direct client for the project. We won a competition, which was in a way to create, there was an earlier building here, and And it's an interesting moment in our career because we've never demolished a bloody thing. We've always built with what we found. But in this case, we came across a problem, which was we needed to liberate the buildings here. We needed to liberate these and bring the public into a collection, which is the major collection, really one of the major public collections, if not the best major collection of post-1945 architecture models and drawings in the world. And it's never really been shown in any permanent, it has never been shown in its permanent site in Orleans. It's traveled around the world and has never really been shown as a total collection because it's vast and an extraordinary piece. So in the future, we'll be showing it for the first time as a complete piece here, along with changing exhibitions in terms of architects from all over the world, in terms of also running the Yashi Lab. So it will be, for architecture, a very meaningful site in the future because it will be open permanently to the public. And there's a very strong interest of Marianne to open it up to children and develop the idea of how do you introduce kids to what architecture is and what ideas are about, and etc. So all of that was the program, and the problem for us really in the brief was that we needed to somehow open it up as a site. So in this case, we proposed in a way creating an entry as a kind of a strange sort of morphic piece that is born out of three different histories. This is the earliest building, this is a later one, there's a later condition here, and they all have their histories. The geometries of those we brought together, and through their confrontation and mixity, we developed this project called turbulence, or turbulent condition. Not unlike a kind of condition which we come across as we travel in an aeroplane. And it's a condition which is very interesting because it's about different air masses, different, in a way, I shouldn't say air masses, but the confrontation of different interests and different histories in this case. And so what we developed were three, in a way, chimney-like pieces. But I'm saying chimney-like with hesitancy because I don't think we really have a name for them. And the more important piece, of course, is this, which is the largest one, which actually becomes a signal, and it becomes a signal to the public in the boulevard. And the boulevard in this case is a very important, very famous boulevard in Orleans, which is where the project is situated, 1 hour south of Paris by train, and it becomes a signal. And so we developed in this project, for the first time, the response was to take away one of the buildings, which blocked this view and this, in a way, the entry into the project. And we thought between the two, it's interesting, because sometimes you need to, what's interesting, of course, is you need to change things, and you need to remove things sometimes in order to then actually benefit the greater whole. And so, of course, that's what we did, and we developed a project around an entry. As I said, we made a major entry through here. We have a video exhibition space. We have a gallery to actuality, which are recent galleries, a recent work, I should say. An entry cafe. And then this kind of, again, this kind of strange plug-in thing becomes part of the program where it has to kind of, in a way, merge and irrigate an existing series of buildings. And ultimately, the surface, as you take cuts through it, becomes this kind of deformed surface up around the building, and the deformation, of course, is held up by its own net, which are these this tubular-like structure. And as we move around it, the view from the courtyard, and the view from the street. And the secondary role, or the secondary aspect of the project, which is very important, is our work with electronic shadows, which is a regional group of electronic artists in Paris, and to actually create this kind of paysage, landscape of light, which is a completely performative surface for the city, for the individual, for the institute and the city, and even further afield. So these are really fruitage models of the project. This is the light intervention is considered, it's a close, approximate idea of representation in terms of the point, the line, and the surface. And so it deals with both the image and or text, and it will have some conceptual way of breaking those down and coming back to the kind of basis of representation and coming up. So we have a complex program that is being developed by these artists that deals not just with information as a direct need, but is information which is somehow changed by the very surface on which it is being emitted from. And therefore the architecture of the site is actually having its effect and vice versa on that information. So, I think it's going to be an interesting piece. These are just different drawings, of course, following through on the development of the piece. It's a really complex structure, and in this case, these are the engineer's drawings, and the engineer we're working with is an extraordinary group who are developing models right down to the screws. Although models are one thing and building is always another, so we're in a phase of still working, having to do a lot of work on the project. As we're under construction as well, we're still developing certain aspects. But these drawings are then being built in a site 100 kilometers from Orléans, and the whole project is built in full scale inside this shed and then dismounted, put onto a truck, and then remounted on site. And again, there's a film in the exhibition which shows that a bit more precisely. And the exhibition spaces in the old buildings, which are remarkable. It's a military storehouse, as well as a food storehouse for the military, ex-military space. So you have these wonderful spaces with a lot of presence. And as the large tower is being built, this is the video space. Mediatek, this is a lost competition in Saint Malo. But I wanted to just show it. It's a piece which is between the TGV and the city of Saint Malo. Very faint, I apologize. These are views around the piece. The idea for us was to raise the whole thing up and have the public walking from the TGV towards the old city of Saint Malo, under the building. Very interesting program because Saint Malo has this extraordinary beady cartoon, world famous cartoon festival, and so it involved developing a library mediatek with 3 cinemas as one total complex. So that hence really what the immediate cinema part is towards the roundabout at the bottom. The TGV is at the top, of course, and beneath the two we developed this maritime, a kind of a micro maritime waterscape that is a landscape which both mimics the island-like quality of the old city of Saint Malo, which I don't show. Unfortunately, I don't show those images, which I should to give you some idea of each of the windows corresponds to a different part of the program. And old Saint Malo as seen from someone walking through the steeple of the town of Saint Malo. Ricard is a group which is really interesting because they're making pastis in the south of Marseille, in the south of France, in Marseille, as well as probably being one of the biggest manufacturers of drinks, one of the biggest manufacturers But they have a very interesting thing, it's called Foundation Ricard, and they give every year the equivalent of a kind of an Oscar award. Just trying to think of some equivalent in a kind of populist sense. But it's a very good award that gives a young aspiring artist in France, and he or she doesn't have to be French, which is even better, the ability to go and live overseas and create a project at the end of which Pompidou will put it into their collection and expose it, and live, but more importantly, live around the world. And so we got to do their gallery space, which is also their foundation space. And it's a very interesting site because it's in the middle of a block, and hence this block-like intervention. And we, essentially, it's extremely simple. It's essentially a white box. The only thing is the walls they're 25 centimeters away from the old walls, which give artists an amazing ability of coming in and making interventions, electronic, whatever interventions within the walls of the space. Essentially, all the plumbing, etc., is left exposed of the building above, the spaces above, and so it's a very. I would encourage you when you're in Paris just to go by and see, because it's a very exciting collection of work that they're constantly showing of young work in France, in the French art scene. And then we made this thing called the bar, which is based on the sun, or the rising sun, or the lowering sun, whatever, of Marseille, which is really a symbolic, an early symbol of pastis. And the Ricard, Mr. Ricard, of course, was this phenomenal character who supported a lot of philanthropic interests in France and around the world, and so it's a kind of homage in a way to this person as well as the society. But more importantly, it's a space which becomes a gathering point for different events within the foundation. So it's, in this case, of course, its method, in a sense, is localized maybe back in the work of Florence Loewy, but again, that's something we developed for this project. This is a recent competition that we won for School of Graphic Design in Pau, in the south of France, near the Basque part of France. It's a city called Pau, which overlooks the Pyrenees. And we built on top of a Catholic girls' school a complete new intervention of a mediathèque, which would also be a roof deck and cafe at the level of the railings, and then a complete mediathèque, classes, etc. above. And so these are just basically competition images, which I'm sharing with you. Taipei, I'm going to finish on Taipei Performing Arts because it was a project which we, in fact, we did it absurdly fast. And sometimes maybe making fast things is not so bad. We got 4th place. Koolhaas got, of course, 1st. I'm not too sure where they are with the project. But in this case, our project was based on the idea of a relationship between red bamboo, or a red tree, and silkworms as they weaved their skin around a series of theatres and performance spaces, as well as leaving the city filtering through the site. And I think, I'm sure you've seen a lot of different projects that came out of this competition. It was a very interesting site, and a very, Taiwan, of course, today is still one of these kind of remarkable cities in terms of the recent number of competitions that they've been producing. Anyway, this is our version for the Taipei opera. And without going into more detail, I think it's probably good to speed up and finish there on the basic images of the project. This is inside the public hall space. looking from one theatre space to another, images around the building envelope.